Sam Nolochungu makes the very important point that the nationalist movement can be revolutionary in a Marxist sense, something that Baruch Gerson simply does not appreciate. But Nolochungu makes this very important point, that a nationalist movement can be revolutionary in a Marxist sense, despite its lack of revolutionary organization or even ideology. He adds, and I agree, that it is not necessary to decide whether black consciousness was revolutionary or not in a Marxist sense by reference to its organization and doctrines or the empirical characteristics of its leaders in the first place. Far more decisive, far more important are the necessary implications of its objective political situation and practice. In short, the form of the political terrain in that 1960s period and how SASO was bound to move on this terrain. So in other words, your interpretation of SASO's character cannot be read off from an analysis of who its members were, what its doctrine was, or from its organization. So because they were black students and they formed part of an elite, it must have been a bourgeois organization. Well, I think that's crude analysis. And that's what, unfortunately, Baruch Gerson, who's a superb analyst in many senses, falls into that trap. You must also analyze a movement or an organization like SASO on the basis of an analysis of the educational conditions and the political conditions and the terrain on which it operated and how it affected that terrain. In poor people's movement, Puvin and Cloud, right? What was won must be judged by what was possible. So we must ask, in relation to the project of national liberation, if SASO on the whole made gains or lost ground, whether it advanced the interests of the dominated classes and social groups or set them back. My argument is that SASO was a product of revolutionary circumstances, which was itself driven to a profoundly subversive political role. It helped to ignite, in the form of the Soweto uprising, a political conflagration that reshaped political relations in South Africa. It all starts in '76, and you cannot rewrite history to efface the contribution of SASO and the Black Consciousness movement. In so doing, it hardly promoted middle-class interests, as Gerson wants to argue, at the expense of worker interests. Thus, there cannot be much difficulty in recognizing that the Black Consciousness movement as having been revolutionary. Third, much of the literature on SASO and Black Consciousness views them in purely political and instrumental terms. As a consequence, this misses SASO's and Black Consciousness' important cultural, expressive, and symbolic features. Take, for example, cultural innovation. With SASO and the Black Consciousness movement came a number of developments, all connected with enhancing black pride, assertiveness, and solidarity. Now, you might want to scoff at that today. In the conditions of the 60s, that was very important, when you have been constantly told you are nothing. One was the slogan, "Black is beautiful." And along with this, an attack on hair straightening and skin lightening creams that was doing serious damage to our people. Another was the Afro hairstyle and the dress of a more African character. Yet another was the clenched fist salute, embodying black solidarity and opposition to white domination. Then there were also the various slogans and songs that emphasized black self-reliance, expressed defiance of the existing social order, and voiced the hope of a better future. There was also the cultural production that was inspired by black consciousnesses, such as poetry, theater, drama, and so on. What Alberto Melucci calls representation. This was important in critiquing the social order and stirring black audiences to action. Symbolically, SASO played a vital prophetic function in repudiating white liberal notions of black assimilation into existing white and Eurocentric culture, and in holding out the vision of a non-racial society that would be the product of all social groups and reflect their rich cultural diversity. In repudiating the term non-white, because that's what we were called in those days, non-whites, and claiming they were black, SASO activists rejected being identified in the negative, sought to escape the categories and language of the dominant group and classes, and asserted their own identity and the right to name themselves. So when a black chancellor, when a vice chancellor goes to a historically white university, he or she takes these experiences into that historically white university. Because this vice chancellor, when he got to Rhodes University in 2006, discovered that he was termed a non-white. That the official statistics digest of Rhodes University spoke about me and black students at Rhodes University in 2006 as non-whites. Right. So, if it wasn't for SASO and it wasn't a consciousness of what those people achieved and why you have to speak about ourselves as black rather than non-white, then I don't think we're coming to grips with the kind of challenges that our society is still facing. In the Senate of Rhodes University in November 2007, after being there for 1.5 years, I finally indicated to the senators of my university that come January 2008, I may not stand silent any longer when the next professor academic speaks about a non-white at Rhodes University. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that's witting and deliberate, but it shows a lack of consciousness of our history around issues that I thought the SASO generation had raised our consciousness about. And I'm sure that's not only Rhodes University. I know it's not only Rhodes University. Okay? And the saddest thing is to find black South African colleagues using the term non-white to describe themselves, like it happened in my office 3 weeks ago. Okay? When we had to finally, after listening to the issues, had to point out to this black colleague of ours why I took offense at the term non-white. But he was constantly using the term non-white. The other thing, if you want to personalize and draw, is again coming from this kind of understanding of our history, is that when you go again to a historically white university, apart from the terrain of language and how we are identified and non-identified and so on, you have to also be quite clear. You're either going in there to embrace a white liberal notion of assimilation into the existing culture of Rhodes University, or WITS or UCT, or equipped by the thinking of the Black Consciousness movement, that you declare yourself from day one that you refuse to be assimilated into an institutional culture that's 102 years old and that speaks to you from every wall, every pore, every name, every painting. And you either say to yourself, you will accommodate yourself to that, or you say to yourself, you will be transforming day by day, week by week, month by month, that institutional culture. And again, you only are able to do those kinds of things if you have a certain consciousness of where we come from and what the contributions of Black Consciousness movement are. That's my attempt to say this is not history, colleagues. This is today. And without this consciousness of this history and what the contribution of SASO was, I fear we will not transform our universities or our institutions unless we engage on this terrain of institutional culture, assimilation or non-assimilation, language, identity, and so on. Yes, I want to recognize that the attempts of the SASO generation to expound on the concept black, or on black values, or the concept of the black university may have been somewhat incoherent. And Neville Alexander has pointed this out. But to their credit, they refused to accommodate to white conservative and liberal conceptions of the world and of behavior and conduct. Instead, they pointed the SASO generation as best they could to the possibility of radically different ideas and practices. Through their organization, they showed that black students did not need to depend on whites for their thinking and organizational activities. Thus, SASO both challenged the dominant culture, and it also attempted to innovate intellectually and culturally. The book also makes clear that the black students were not just victims of apartheid, as far too often we are written about as victims, but were thinkers, conscious actors, historical agents. Ironically, it was a generation that was meant to be intellectually stultified by Bantu education, whose cognitive praxis gave rise to the revolutionary doctrine of black consciousness. That's an amazing achievement. Further, in the face of an authoritarian and repressive political order, SASO constituted black students as an organized social force, functioned as a school of political formation and a catalyst of collective action, and contributed to the erosion of the apartheid social order and to educational and social transformation in South Africa. Finally, the social structural relations that underpin unbridled wealth and privilege and the concomitant inequality, poverty, unemployment, and unequal opportunities to high-quality education, to healthcare, to social services continue to prevail in 2010. It seems to me that crucial questions of race, values, identity, culture, new intellectual frames, and social and cultural transformation that SASO and the black consciousness generation raised remain highly relevant to us in 2010 and moving forward. Any substantive social justice agenda cannot ignore these conditions and issues, and must imaginatively and creatively develop strategies to address these issues and to erode and transform these conditions. Here, BICO and SASO provide pointers, the right ways to tackle them boldly and fearlessly, and with the aplomb, the energy, and the uncompromising intellectual, cultural, and organizational endeavor of the SASO generation. Like them, we must push to the limits, the bounds of possibility, because that's what they did under very difficult conditions in the pursuit of social equity, justice, human rights, democracy, and development. All the good things we speak about, but seem to be very timid to really take on in any full frontal way. This is the lesson of BICO, Black Consciousness, and the South African Students' Organization. Nkosinathi has started the process. Let me, in this, first and foremost, there are many people to thank in a book like this. And I want to begin with Shirin and my sons, for reasons they know all too well. Nkosinathi and the BICO Foundation for commissioning and financing the book and sponsoring this event, or co-sponsoring it, especially to Onwiba and Bruce for putting it together. Elaine Unterhalter in the UK, late Harold Wolpe, who often provided very incisive critical commentary when this book was being prepared, and the late Samuel Nolochungu, who gracefully accommodated some very stimulating telephonic conversations. My only regret was that I never got to meet him face to face. These were conversations that were happening with me in Boston and him in Rochester. Numerous SASO and other political activists who made time for conversations with me on various aspects of SASO and political conditions and liberation politics between 60 and 77, Diliza MG, Eric Mulubi, Tera Lokota, and others. Various people who assisted with research materials and facilitate my work. The late Adam Small permitted me to reproduce his entire collection of SASO documents, Librarians at the University of Cape Town, Western Cape, Boston, London, and York provided me other assistance. Raymond Suttner, who is here tonight, for his encouragement and for also recommending the editorial services of Priscilla Hall, an old black sash person from Grahamstown. Our huge debt to her for her intelligent grasp of what I sought to communicate, and for her rigor, attention to detail, a veritable wordsmith. She helped to produce a book that I think is much more readable, but also satisfies the requirements of scholarship. Bani Pachana, for his forward to the book. The Dean of Humanities of this university for hosting this event together with the Biko Foundation. And finally, my own university for its commitment to the advancement of knowledge and scholarship, its vibrant scholarly culture, and which actually provides me the stimulus to continue to research, write, and publish. Finally, it's fitting that this book on SASO and black consciousnesses was revised, reworked, and first launched at Rhodes University. And I'll tell you why. In 1967, the annual Congress of the National Union of South African Students was held at Rhodes University. NUSAS represented students from the white and black universities. One of the delegates at this Congress was Stephen Bantu Biko. A few days before this Congress, the Rhodes University administration resolved not to permit black delegates to stay on campus in residence, nor would they be allowed to attend any social functions on campus. This is 1967. And I'm proud to say we have apologized for this in an open acknowledgement of a letter of shame that has been widely published for these kinds of things and other terrible things that that university did during its history. Biko walked out of the Congress and went to visit Bani Pachana, who was then a student at Fort Hare. The rest you can read in Black Man, you are on your own. Thank you very much.